Hello, I'm Jerry Laws, editor of Occupational Health and Safety magazine. Welcome to this one-hour live presentation, which is titled VPP Status, Continuous Process Improvement Through Contractor Qualification. It is sponsored by Dubrows, LLC. Our speaker is Pat Cunningham, Director of Safety and Auditing Services for Dubrows. He has a master's degree in Occupational Health and Safety Management and more than 25 years' experience in the field of safety. Today he'll discuss pre-qualification options for VPP sites that address risk mitigation, stakeholder concerns, and more. You can submit a question for our presenter at any time during the presentation, and I will moderate a Q&A session during the final minutes of the hour. And Dubrows has provided several resources for all attendees as part of this webinar. Using the resource icon at the bottom of the console, you can download PDFs of a contractor safety risk assessment, supply chain accountability ladder, and a Dubrows brochure, as well as video demos and information on the journey to safety excellence. If you experience technical difficulties, click on the Help button located below the slide window and you'll receive technical assistance. Finally, after the session is complete, we will be emailing you a link to the archived version of this webinar so you can view it again or share it with a colleague. And now I'll turn it over to Pat Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. As we move to slides, excuse me, as Jerry mentioned, I am the Director of Safety and Health for Dubrows. A little bit about Dubrows. We are a contractor pre-qualification supplier. What we do is we help large businesses manage their supply chain. We vet their information. We put the information on a web-based platform, put a scoring system together for our clients. We collect the information on their behalf of the protocols that they feel is important to their company before they can hire contractors. We verify the information, and we keep that information current for our suppliers and our clients. We're an international company as well, and we believe we can offer some assistance to companies looking to improve their efforts for contractor safety. So a little bit what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover the prevalence of contractors and suppliers in industry. We're going to talk about a need to pre-qualify companies and then keep them qualified. We're going to address the different approaches that have been made for improving safety, not just contractor safety, and we're going to borrow those themes, and we can apply that for contractor safety as well. And I'll show you an assessment that can be used to do that. And before I get started on that, I'll just say that I appreciate your time coming on the call today. In conversation with many professionals in safety and procurement over the years, and from my own personal corporate experience, companies do a fairly good job of understanding their obligations to their employees in terms of safety and health. Where many of them fall short is in the area of contractor safety. And it's not just my observation in conversation with others. I'll illustrate later in this presentation how even OSHA and the National Safety Council have also acknowledged the fact that as a country we could do better. And today I hope to show you some information and give you some tangible information that you can use to improve your efforts with contractor safety. So my point of this presentation is that companies who want to become a VPP site use a best practice approach that OSHA put together and with the help of industry, and we can use this same concept, this same thought to help vet and assess our supply chain companies that work for us in industry. And from previous experience with you mentioned, if you mention VPP, Voluntary Protection Program, to some people in industry, some recognize it right away as an industry best practice, and then some people fear the aspect of having OSHA, the prospect of having OSHA come on site and take a look and walk around through their facilities and look for gaps in compliance, and so this has kind of a polarizing effect with some companies and some personnel. What I'm going to propose today is that you can take these elements, this concept or philosophy towards worker safety, and in this conversation be contractor safety. You can use these techniques to evaluate your suppliers and help for a safer workforce, a safer workplace in your own environments.
Thank you, Pat. Now we have a poll. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Thank you. We now have a poll question for the audience to answer, please. Do you agree with the following? Yes, organizations are relying more and more on contractors. Yes, there is a greater focus on regulations and company image. Yes, organizations should evaluate their contractors. Please take a few moments to participate in this poll. Okay, let's push out the results. Very high numbers. 79.2%. Yes, yes. Please take it back over, Pat.
Very good, Jerry. So very good. The purpose of this is just to see if we're on the same page. And in some environments, there isn't consensus on these questions, and sometimes there is. So this audience is very much on board with the need to qualify contractors, and they realize that there are more contractors in the workplace, and there is a greater focus on regulations and company image. We'll go into this here in the next couple slides. So I'll review some information with you. Is that the economics is driving that. So when I first started work in the industry, I worked for electric utility, and when I started out there, they employed all the employees that were necessary to do complete overhauls and construction and build power plants and maintain them and maintain the lines and transmission process. And over the course of time, they had changed as the regulations and economics turned that, so they had to downsize their workforce, and it doesn't matter who you talk to or what industry you're in. That's just the reality of the world that we're in. So we are dealing with lean hiring practices, and the benefits of that in terms of reduced benefits and cost and flexibility of the amount of employees or amount of workers in a workforce. And then also with the amount of specialty efforts and work that takes place, there comes a time when there's expertise that's needed that's not available on site, and so there is more of a reliance on contractors and a flexible staffing model. In terms of regulatory requirements, unfortunately at this time there isn't a sole document from OSHA saying here's what we expect of employers in terms of how they manage their contractors and orientate them and bring them in to the workplace and show them the hazards and communicate to them and get them involved with the safety efforts on site. At present, I've shown here 7 standards that contractor safety requirements are embedded into these various standards. So you do have to look a little bit into the regulations to find where OSHA is coming from in terms of what their expectations are for hiring employers. There are a couple business implication documents that are available. Back in the 90s, when the multi-employer citation policy went through, we were all going to conferences and trying to figure out what is a creating employer and exposing and correcting and controlling, and we were going through that evolution of what that meant, and really what OSHA acknowledged was the workforce has changed. It continues to change today and evolves, that no longer are workplaces isolated in terms of workers working shoulder to shoulder, the business owner employees and the contractors. They realized that these workplaces are embedded and people work closely, intimately closely to get the job done. So OSHA was reflecting what was taking place in the industry at the time, and it came up with the multi-employer citation policy, and that employers of all types there's joint responsibilities. Another business implication, and this is a voluntary protection program. This is not a requirement by OSHA by any means, but if this, in my opinion, if you want to know where OSHA believes employers should be going to in terms of managing their contractors, this would probably be the best document to really get an idea about where OSHA believes employers should go with their suppliers. And the very first bullet item, I won't read through all of them, but it's that they expect there is some pre-qualification screening going on before they hire contractors. A business owner hires a contractor, and I can tell from firsthand experience when we've back in industry when we had an event that took place. It was due to a contractor. OSHA came on site and they brought in the business owner, us, and they asked us about the contractor and what we did for hiring and how we vetted them and what criteria that we were looking at and what information did we share with them. So this is very important to OSHA in terms of doing an investigation and looking at what's taking place at any given site. So you'll have this information available to you, but these are elements that OSHA is looking for in terms of what they expect you to communicate with your suppliers and have a conversation with them, bring them into the conversation. They want to take a look at combined workforce injury rates, and they want to make sure that there's good lines of communication. So these are just good business practices that you really don't have to be a VPP applicant to implement any of these. Again, this is just good business. I'll bring you up to date a little bit with this group in terms of what else is on OSHA's mind. And as we mentioned, that business is evolving just with culture and economics. And there's a new type of worker in industry right now, and it's the temporary staffing agency worker. And this quote from Dr. David Michaels of OSHA just acknowledges the fact that there are temporary workers on the job site, and we have to look out for one another when they're on the work site. And I'll offer a precautionary message to you that if you're an employer that is using a temporary staffing agency, I would make sure that you have in writing the various aspects of the contract in terms of primarily who is providing supervision and how do employees report injuries, report hazards, how are they involved with correcting hazards in the workplace, and where they're getting their training and how they're communicating with the employer. And right now I would have to say that this is probably the biggest gap in industry in terms of their exposure to workers who are coming from temporary staffing agencies. So this can easily be handled through a good contract, but awareness on both parties is critical. So why do we pre-qualify contractors? We've already done our survey, and we realized that it's important to do that. I'll say this right off the bat that, as I mentioned before, you're pretty well in tune with your responsibilities to how to improve your worker safety and how to get them workers involved and that type of thing. You've built a culture based on experience and dialogue, and where we tend to have a little gap is with contractors. And when you bring in a contractor, here's your opportunity to explain to them, this is our culture, this is our experience, here's where we're trying to go with safety. And if you have that communication with them, you share your goals, your objectives, and your expectations, they'll come on board with it. I was a student of safety, and we read the textbooks by Dan Peterson, and one of his books was What Gets Measured, Gets Rewarded, Gets Done, and that same philosophy holds true today, that if you clearly communicate to your suppliers your expectations, your desires, they're going to follow you, and they're going to get that done. So this is a great opportunity for you when you bring in a contractor to set the tone and say, here's our expectations, here's our comfort level for risk. And that varies by employer to employer, but this is your opportunity to express your desire, your concern for risk exposure. And then the other reason why do we pre-qualify contractors from purely a humanistic standpoint, there's fewer people going home hurt, and everybody wants to go home safe the same way they came in at the start of the shift, and we're obligated as fellow human beings to make sure that happens. And it's just good business to make sure that people know what they have to do to be successful, injury-free, error-free, and as productive as possible. So with the idea that there's more contractors in the workforce today, there's some steps that you should be taking to make sure that they can be successful. And if you read in the papers, company brand protection is a very important thing. We have business in Europe. At present, it seems to be more of a concern in Europe than it does in the U.S. today, but there isn't any company that wants to see their name in the paper for something that took place as a result of their actions or lack of actions. So protecting the company brand is important, whichever side of an ocean you do business. So we at Dubrows, we have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of contractors that are in the supplier family, and we're headquartered out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and BYU University had an opportunity to take a look at our database, and they crunched some numbers for us, and the end result was that the outcome of this study was that the exercise of going through contractor qualification for a business owner actually helps improve the contractor's own safety program. And here you see that some of the results of the study is that their EMR rates improved by 13%, their lost time injury rates went down 24%, and their recordable incident rate went down 27%. So the exercise of protecting your industry, your business, your assets, at the end becomes better safety outcomes for the supplier company as well. So now we'll get into a little bit more practical information in terms of, we know that we want to qualify contractors, and perhaps you're on the call today because you want to start an effort for contractor qualification, or you want to improve where you are with contractor qualification. You're interested, and I'm glad to hear that. So when as Jerry mentioned, I work for an electric utility, and I was a corporate safety director, and there was a mandate to start a contractor safety department within our company. I was tasked with putting a department together, and we went through this exercise, and it was a cultural change. It was change management that was going through our corporation. What are we going to do about contractors? How are we going to get it done? I found myself in a position that I needed to, if you will, socialize and talk about contractor safety and what that meant to the various stakeholders within the company. And everybody has their own perspective based on their responsibilities. So I had to have a way of talking about this. And within this show that we're presenting today, there are two PDFs that you can use to socialize this within your own company. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. The first one listed here is the Contractor Safety Risk Assessment. It's just a self-assessing scorecard. basic program elements. They're listed on the left-hand side, and you score that. So if you're at a staff meeting and you say, well, we would like to talk about contractor safety and what we're doing, let's see if we're on the same page, and let's talk about where we are. It's something that you can print off a copy and have a conversation. Do we have these elements of a good contractor safety program? On the back page of this scorecard is a total score, and it allows you to have a dialogue on this topic. The second PDF is on the accountability ladder. We adopted that for contractor safety, and it's probably the document I would use first just to get a sense of where people think your company is with contractor safety, and are they unaware of what we're doing with contractor safety? Are they involved with it? And it just gives you a sense of victim behaviors and accountable behaviors, and shows you where you are on the accountability ladder in terms of contractor safety. These are very simple tools that you can use to get a sense, to build some consensus within your own corporation about where you are with contractor safety, and hopefully it'll whet their appetite to do more than what's currently being done. I mentioned the stakeholders. If you're going to have a discussion with company employees on contractor safety, you need to know who are the stakeholders in your company, and you need to put them in the room together. I pulled a list of who in a corporation, the titles may be different, but the job function should be pretty familiar to you. Supply chain and procurement, project management, safety people, risk insurance department, business owner employees that might be at the plant level, your current supply chain, new suppliers, government, and OSHA, and legal. So these are various stakeholders in contractor safety, and the other column on the right is just what is typically their area of concern. And if you have a conversation with any of these individuals about contractor safety, from their perspective, that's their world, you need to hit on those elements so they can get on board with you, and it can make sense that your objective is actually helping them meet their objectives and their responsibilities. So when you have that conversation, these are some of the stakeholders that you may want to talk to and bring into the room. An area where an in-house contractor safety program typically fails or is burdened down is the fact that it's easy to put together a platform, a protocol, saying here's the 15 elements that we think are important to our company based on our comfort or risk, our exposure, that type of thing, and there may be dozens of those types of elements that you want to incorporate. Someone within your company is going to have to reach out to your suppliers and collect that information, explain why it's important to you to get that information, and then verify it, put it in a web-based or put it in a platform, a repository, if you will, for the stakeholders to see and then make good business decisions. Where companies typically fail is that this information is not kept current. There's a huge burden, administrative burden to get that information the first time. And all this information that you collect is going to expire at various points during the year. For example, insurance policies, that you may have a policy that says to work at our company we need a $5 million rider, and you need to make sure that that supplier maintains that and has that on record, and so your exposure, if an event takes place, that your business is covered. This information these documents, these policies can expire, and someone needs to keep up on that. And here, candidly, is an area where most companies struggle. We're going to shift gears a little bit. I mentioned before about VPP, Voluntary Protection Program. In my opinion, it's the gold standard for safety and how to do safety. and I'll present two organizations, OSHA and the National Safety Council, and their thoughts on how best to do safety, regardless of contractor safety or employer safety. So we should be familiar with OSHA's Voluntary Protection Program and their 4 elements of management leadership, employee involvement, worksite analysis, hazard prevention and control, and safety and health training. And within each of these elements, there's requirements within there to checklist requirements that OSHA would be looking for anybody applying to VPP. These again are just good business practices. If we go to the National Safety Council, their thoughts, their efforts, their focus on how to do safety is through the journey of safety excellence, and they describe the key pillars. There's 4 of them: leadership and employee engagement, safety management systems, risk reduction, and performance measurement. And if you take a side-by-side comparison between OSHA and the National Safety Council, the words are a little bit different, but essentially, in my opinion, these are the same things. And the way I view this is that both these organizations did a study, and they concluded pretty much the same thing, that they concurred this is the right way to go, and this is how you do safety. You'll see on the right-hand side of this slide the icon, the journey to safety excellence, and I'm going to do a little side tangent for it during this session here, is that Jerry made mention that I've been in the safety business for over 25 years, and it's been a very good career, and I've seen lots of things. One of the things I'm most excited about is this journey to safety excellence and what this means. It's not a catchphrase. It's not a tagline for, to sell products and to get people thinking. Really, if you go to the National Safety Council's webpage and you click this, you learn a little bit more about it. Here's an opportunity for that the council has said that they realize there's many small to medium-sized companies that don't have the same resources on how to improve safety as large corporations. And what they put together are free assessment tools, free information that anybody can use. You don't have to be a member of the National Safety Council. They can use this information to assess, to do a gap analysis of where their program is and how to improve it. One of the best things they have with this journey to safety excellence is that they have a networking capability. So people who are members of the journey, join the journey, they can ask questions to industry experts and get start some networking and get some answers. And that's probably the biggest challenge small to medium-sized companies have, is they don't have that support group to help them go through problem solving. So I'm excited that the council has put this together. And if the reason why I bring it up, if you're talking to contractors, curious yourself how to improve safety, go to the National Safety Council and take a look at the journey to safety excellence. And I recommend that you join the journey yourself. Well, the purpose of this slide is just to bring to the table the fact that if a lot of companies, they'll focus on safety and they'll focus solely on compliance. And I'm never going to go into a presentation saying compliance is not important. It is. It's the basic fundamentals to working safe and setting your expectations for injury-free workplace. But I'll say if you focus solely on compliance, you're not going to have the total picture of what's taking place for safety in your company. People get injured every day on compliant jobs, compliant workforces. So most of the injuries that I think if you take a look, most of the injuries that you've encountered at your own workplace are not by employees who got hurt because they violated a company policy or a safety work standard. Typically, these are human performance errors, lack of training, lack of communication, understanding, sophistication of expectations and safety programs to reach workers at all levels and all levels of learning. So I would recommend that companies take a look at safety beyond compliance, and I'll show you examples here coming up on how you can do that for contractor safety. So if you're starting a contractor safety program, I'll give you some suggestions on areas that you can improve on or add if you don't currently have, and these are typical for a company to collect a supplier's OSHA 300 log and take a look at their injury performance, and that's typically done in February when companies are obligated to post their injury logs of the previous year. You can also collect this on a monthly basis for your work sites as well. So you can take this lagging indicator and make it a little more relevant, a little more current. So these are what some companies are doing to help get a better handle of their exposure and what's taking place. Another thing that employers can take a look at is that rather than just looking at the company level, you can look at a supplier's employee level. And what does that mean? You can look at their, take a look at their training, take a look at if their workers are current on their annual training, take a look at certifications that you might require for welding or forklift operation, those kinds of things that you can collect and verify that these are qualified workers coming to your job sites. Another area that you can do in your own company is to, if you have a contractor working for a project manager, the easiest thing you can do is after the job is done, have a form for them, for that internal employee to fill out about that contractor and talk about, have them address areas of, was this a good supplier to work with? Were they responsive to your requests? Were their workers, did they work safe? Did you have good encounters with them or not? And have this information shareable to the other stakeholders so when they go out to hire a contractor that they have some supplier information to make a good business decision. Some of the considerations for assessment is I'll say from experience here is that supply chain companies are really looking for the business owner to sit down with them. They typically would like to hear your thoughts on how they're performing, how they can improve, and just have a conversation about safety and about how they're performing for you. And I think you'll find that these are very productive meetings and good conversations. In doing assessments and contractors, your own employees or contractors, you know that culture is very dynamic and factors change. People make decisions every day, multiple times during the day, so it's important to stay current and have a sense of where your culture is and where it's going. So now I'll shift to the VPP approach for contractor safety and how you can use the elements of contractor safety, a VPP, to help assess your supply chain companies. And this is just a screenshot of an assessment that we do at Dubrows to take a look at the culture of a supplier safety program. It's really taking a look at how well they can perform for you in terms of safety and how sophisticated their safety program is. So under the element of management, leadership, and employee involvement, here's an example of some of the questions that you can ask within this assessment to really get a sense of where they are, as opposed to just taking a stab at looking at their injury rates and trying to figure out if their work performance is based on luck or if it's based on a really dedicated effort to improve safety. So some of the information that you can take a look at is just how are the leadership of the company, how are they managed in terms of what is their expectation for their own employees, and are they held accountable for the safety of their employees, and not in terms of injury rates, but in terms of talking to them and ensuring that they're trained before they go on the job site, and supervisor coverage and observation in the field. So these are the things that you can collect. We have collected for other customers, and this really can give you a good sense of where a company is. Under worksite analysis, just pull out an example here, is that when a company brings in a new tool, materials, or equipment, do they do an assessment on how that's going to impact their job sites, their employee safety? And you may be surprised that that's a standard practice for some of your suppliers, that they do that. They do that hazard assessment. They do that job safety analysis, and they take a look at how change in the workplace is going to impact worker safety. The next element, hazard prevention and control. Do your suppliers know how to take a look at safety, how to break it down and do problem solving? Do they understand the concepts of elimination, substitution, engineering, administrative controls, and PPE, and when to, in what order to do that problem solving? Or do they go directly to PPE? You can really get a sense of where they are and collect this from their policy statements and from how they train their employees. And this is information you can actually collect or have collect. And lastly, under the safety and health training, some of the information that you can collect is with their employee training. Do they update that on an annual basis or biannual? And is the updates based on real life experience? Are they learning from what's taking place in the field, and are they making adjustments with their training? And do employees get the opportunity to do a training evaluation of how the training went and add their input? So this is a level of sophistication that some companies are using today in how to assess their suppliers. So with this assessment that we put together, what we do is we have the objective of that assessment is the ability of that company to work safely for you, the client, and really taking a look at the depth of their safety program. It's a scoring system. Each element is an individual score, and then there'll be a total score. The scoring system is 0 for not addressing the element at all. 5 is partially addressed but lacking in some regard, and 10 points for fully addressed program. And when we do this assessment, we are looking for evidence that this is not just a verbal commitment, that we are looking for written evidence that they've completed these items, or they have this element in their system. And they'll have a total score. At the end, you'll have a report showing a percent that this company is in terms of safety sophistication. What you have is a greater understanding of their capabilities, and the supplier will have a gap analysis. They'll have tangible information. Here's what we need to do to improve our safety program, and here's the areas that we need to work on and focus on and how to improve. So this just gave you a sense of what you can do with contractor safety. And I'd like to add one other point here, is that with this kind of assessment that I just made mention of, is that when you do an audit, and think about what in your own situation, if this rings true, is a lot of times a company will do auditing, whether it's internal audit or external audit, and they'll collect lots of data points, and a report will be generated. But are you, at the end of the day, are you looking at data points, or are you looking at intelligence? And in terms of contractor safety, what you're collecting simply a data point that's difficult to turn into an action item, or are you gaining supplier intelligence? Is this information readily transferable to the supplier, to your company, and how to make improvements? And that's the biggest challenge for any kind of audit, is to turn this into action items and get this make improvements. And with this management system assessment that I showed you, and you can do this on your own if you like, the nice thing about this kind of assessment, because it's not tied to compliance strictly, the responsibility is really on the supplier to make changes. This is not a type of audit that you do and that as a safety department or as a project manager, you're now stuck with tracking all these elements to completion. Your law department will be very happy that this is not something that they have to collect and have as exposure that we have a problem that we're not dealing with. These are elements that are on a continuum. So it's not a non-compliant or compliant situation. It's on a scale of where they're at. So the responsibility for correction is really up to the supplier and not the business owner. So that, to me, I think that was a game changer for me. So when we completed this assessment, if you're an auditor yourself, you'll recognize the fact that no one is really happy when you show up. And the only time you might get a smile on their face is when you're about ready to leave. So these are actual supplier quotes. When we completed the assessment, the management system assessment that I showed you, and you'll see that I mentioned before that your suppliers look to you for guidance on how to improve, that you are representing industry, whether you realize that or not, and you represent an entity that is bigger than yourself. And so these suppliers were glad that industry is heading in this direction, and that they're taking safety as an important thing and interested in their suppliers making improvements. So these are some actual feedback that you could probably receive yourself. So we talked about, just do a summary page here, we talked about the prevalence of suppliers, we talked the business case about why pre-qualify. We looked at two organizations and their approach to best practices management systems, and they concluded they came up with the same results essentially in similar ways of how to go about that. And I gave you an example of how to do that type of a VPP type audit, if you will, for your suppliers. And I hope that you'll find something tangible for your own program, or to start a program, or to whet your appetite in how to improve contractor safety, because as I started off before, as a country we can do better with contractor safety. It's the same conversation we've had together as individuals. OSHA is saying the same thing to us, that we can do better, and I hope you take up the challenge yourself, and I appreciate your time today. Jerry, I'll turn it back to you.
Very good, Pat. Thank you so much. Excellent job. So we are now to the Q&A portion of this webinar, and we have ample time left, I think. We'll probably get to just about all the questions that have been submitted, but there is still time. As everybody in the audience should understand, you can still submit a question if you wish. And if we don't get to it during this remaining part of the hour, Pat and his colleagues will see all the questions that have been submitted and can get back to you with answers in the coming days. So please do submit them if you have them. Here's the first one, Pat. Here's a good question. What do you think are just the 2 or 3 most important items you would recommend that we track on contractors?
That's a good question, and I think the first thing is that your exposure, your company liability needs to be addressed. And so if you're hiring contractors, the it's a lagging indicator, but it's a good sense of getting a good sense of that company's ability to prevent injury. So I would say the injury logs would be the one of the things I would collect as a minimum. The other one from your company risk management group, I would recommend is that you collect their insurance, their coverage for liability if something happens as a result of their workers' efforts or lack of efforts. So I would collect that information as well, and make sure that your company has a predefined limit in terms of what kind of coverage is required for each contractor, and make sure that's collected and kept current. That's a critical piece of information that will prevent financial loss to you and your company. I would also recommend, as a third element, incorporate at least one leading indicator to get a sense of where your suppliers are in terms of their safety. And I went through that exercise of showing you that management system, VPP model, that assessment. I would collect some of that and get a sense of their culture, get a sense of how they prepare their workers to work safe. I think that type of intelligence is going to get you much further than simple compliance.
Good answer. Thank you. Here's an intriguing question. Does OSHA view temporary employees and contractors as one and the same?
I believe they do. You know, that's probably a fine line in terms of distinction. I'm sure that we could look it up, and there'll be a definition in the dictionary somewhere. But it's really a temporary workforce that's coming in, whether they represent a company or a staffing agency. They're supplementing your own employee, full-time equivalent employee workforce. And what OSHA is primarily looking for is that their safety is covered as well. You know, I made mention of the multi-employer citation policy and temporary workers. OSHA is saying that regardless who they are and who you are, we have an obligation to one another to make sure that the workplace is safe, there's good communication. So OSHA is saying that regardless of who you are and what classification you are, you have the right for a safe and healthy work environment.
Very true. Good answer. Thank you. I think this is a good question. If I work with a contractor for multiple or ongoing projects for many years, how often should the contractor submit information?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it depends on the type of information that you're collecting. You know, the one distinction with Browse is that our phrase, if you will, is the right fit, and so there isn't any one of our clients that has the same program. So our experience has been that what's important to one company may not be quite as important to another, and there's limited information that they want collected based on where they're going. So it does vary from company to company based on their own experience, the type of work that they do, the hazards that workers are exposed to. But that information can expire on an annual basis. If we're talking about OSHA logs, that's an annual thing. If we're looking at employee training, that can be annual as well. It all depends on the type of certifications. They might be every 2 years, every 3 years. First aid training, for example, every 3 years. So it's all based on the protocols of what you're collecting and what the limits are. I'll give you another thing that I didn't even make mention of, is that you know, business owners, there's an expectation from OSHA that the business owner not just hires a contractor and hires safe contractors, but then they go out in the field and they make sure that the workers are working safely, and they're understanding the requirements and the communication that they were given. So there's an expectation from OSHA that you're out in the field and you're making observations, you're collecting that. You know, if it didn't get documented, it didn't get done. That's anybody who studies safety has heard that phrase before. So that type of information is collected on a daily basis. Excuse me.
Good answer. Thank you so much. We've got time for at least 2 or 3 more questions, I think, and some good ones are still coming in. Someone asks this, organizations and owners that are conducting an audit of their contractors' written safety programs, is there a risk of liability for the organizations and owners to do this?
You know, I'm losing my voice here, but I guess it does depend on your profession. As a safety person, we were trained that you want to find out where a company is, or you're going to do an investigation, you're going to do an assessment, an audit, and what you collect is really gold nuggets. You know, if you're doing this in advance of a negative consequence, you've got the opportunity to make improvement before something bad takes place. And that's an opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. If you're a lawyer, if you're in that profession, there is a concern that if you collect some information and there's a gap in compliance or company policy, that the clock is ticking and that you're out of compliance, and what are you doing to mitigate that and get that set in place. So well, I can say what most of what our clients prefer in terms of collecting written safety policy information is that due diligence on the part of our clients is that when they take a look at their supply chain's written documents based on the, you know, confined space entry, lockout, tagout, HAZCOM, those kinds of things, that they're making sure that these companies have compliant safety programs. And we do these types of audits on the behalf of our clients. So we do run into situations where a client may not have a HAZCOM program, or they're missing one of the elements of the HAZCOM program. Well, at least they're collecting that information and they're verifying that they're compliant. They do have the ability, once identified, that they're missing something to revise their written program. So as long as you're collecting the information, you're doing your due diligence, that you're finding out, do they have the capability and are they trained, and as long as you're actively pursuing correction, in my personal opinion, you're far ahead of the game, and you'll be all right.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We've got time for several more, I think, or at least 3 anyway. Here's a good question. What level of review should we go through with low-risk contractors, maybe such as the lawn mowing company, as an example?
Yeah. I would take a look at the risk, really. That's really where you want to take a look at your suppliers and what job functions do they provide services, products, that type of thing. What do they provide for you? And what is the risk of the work that they do for you? And based on risk, then you can set up your protocols for what type of information you need to collect for them. So, you know, some businesses perform more risky or more at-risk services than others. And I would, that's another thing about Dubrows, that we recommend that you collect only to the level that's needed. And if they're not performing high-risk services, then I would not recommend that you collect programs that they don't need to have for doing work for you. For example, if they're doing lawn work and they're on the ground, they're not up in trees, that they probably don't need a fall protection program, and you don't need to go through the cost of assessing that program. So based on the hazards that perform for you, I would only collect what's really relevant.
Very good answer. Thank you. This one just came in. Most of your presentation focused on U.S. regulations and programs. What is your experience in terms of the emphasis placed in other countries?
Very good question, and we do auditing internationally at Dubrows, and I have a counterpart. His name is Mike Ford, and he's out of our UK office, and my experience is with the U.S., and Mike has our international side, and I will admit that my understanding of international regulations is not very strong myself, but there are in my conversations with Mr. Ford, there is a big difference between expectations in the U.S. and across the globe, and yeah, a U.S. model would not fit in Europe or other parts of the world.
Good answer. Thank you. A very practical question. When do you perform the evaluation? Is it pre-bid, pre-selection, pre-kickoff, or during construction?
That is a good question, and you know, some of our clients, we collect best practices ourselves, and we share that with our clients, and some of our clients, what they'll do is they'll collect information on a contractor that they'll have a pre-bid form that they have the supplier self-assess. So they'll ask them, what kind of work do you do? And they'll get a sense, they'll collect information up front without actually verifying the information, going through the cost of verifying the information, because that does get a bit costly to collect it and verify it. So they'll self-assess. They'll say, here's what we do, and they'll respond to it. It gives the client a snapshot of what that supplier has in terms of a safety program, and so they'll, if they like what they'll see, they may offer, they might set out a RFP for this company to do some type of work. Once they do that, then they'll collect more information. So I guess the point of my story is that we have clients that collect as they need. They'll progress along and go deeper and deeper as they get more involved with that contractor. And I think that's probably smart business. There's really no point in collecting all this data for a company that you're not going to do business with. So you know, collect as you need and move forward.
Good answer. Thank you very much. We've got time for just one more. Please understand, everybody, that all the questions that you've submitted, and many of them are very good, Pat and his colleagues will see and will be able to answer, even though we haven't gotten to some of them during this Q&A. So here's the last one. What do you recommend for a situation when you have a contractor that refuses to fill out the required safety documentation and pre-qualification documents, but they are the only company that can do the work?
That is an excellent question, and I've faced this firsthand myself when I when I was working in the electric utility business and also with Dubrows. And our recommendation to all of our clients is that contractor pre-qualification and qualification is not an elective. This is something that needs to be collected. This is your company's livelihood at stake, your company brand at stake, and so if you make it clear to the contractor that in order to do business for us, we need this information, and here's why we need it. So some people are skeptical about why they're collecting this information and why is it important to you, and they may not see the broader purpose of it. So if you explain to them why this is important to you, and this is how we do business, you'll have fewer of those companies that will say, I don't agree with it. So I am very much familiar with the concern that a business owner has, that as an operational person, the last thing, one of their fears, go back to that stakeholder slide, is that I might not be able to hire the contractor that I want to use. And so they're concerned about that. And what I can say is that most of these contractors, the vast majority of them, will get on board with you. And if you set your protocols appropriately, for example, what you collect, and I'll give you, I don't know how we're doing with time, but I'll give you a little scenario here where, let's say that you have a company that you're working with a protocol on your injury rates, and you say that we won't hire a company that where their safety numbers are higher than 25% of the industry average, for example. It's not a yes or no type hire. What you can do is you can have them write a safety policy or a safety contingency plan that says, yes, we acknowledge our injuries are higher than industry average, and you do some data analysis, you do some supplier intelligence, and you find out that this small company that might have had an eye injury and it put them over the top. If you have them put out a business plan that says, when we're working on your site, here's the extra steps we're going to go to make sure that we don't have these kind of injuries on your site. You know, the extra PP, the extra employee training, the extra field supervision, and you can do an override, and you can have them work on your site and have them communicate to you why they're how they can work injury-free. So there's some latitude that you can have with that, and I know people like to what if.
Yes. Thank you very much, Pat. I do appreciate that. That's a good answer and a good way to sum up this excellent webinar. We are at the top of the hour. So I want to thank our audience, thank our speaker, Pat Cunningham, for an excellent presentation today, and also thank today's sponsor, Dubrows, LLC. Remember, in the next day or two, we will be emailing you a link to an archived version of this webinar so you can review it or pass it along to a colleague. Thank you very much for attending, and this concludes today's